All right, so I'm going to go through something really quickly. This is just minimum viable testing. Some of you guys might be familiar with this and have done similar things in the past, but really it's kind of like if you've got an idea or a new feature or something you want to launch and you just need like the quickest, fastest way to get results and prove out if it makes sense to build more, this is how you're going to do it. So the idea is that people get ideas for startups, for new features, for whatever else, and then it takes a lot of money and a lot of time to test them, right? So testing out ideas is not always the fastest thing. It might require you building a whole new flow. It might require a bunch of new engineering. You might have to change a lot of different crucial parts of your product, and from that, you're going to get a lot of tech debt. So I'm going to talk about a little bit how are we going to optimize as much as possible to make it really easy. So for myself, I test out a lot of ideas, and I am often able to do it for less than $100. And that could be something like adding a new feature, adding a new pricing plan, or I often just do it if I've got an idea for like, hey, maybe it would make sense to have better analytics around Snapchat, right? And so is that going to be something where I can acquire customers for easily? So I'll go out and make a landing page and then test it out. So the goal for this is you're going to find out actually if there's a market for the idea, product, feature. And then one thing that I think a lot of people miss when they're first doing initial tests is you can get an idea of what your customer is going to look like as well, right? So there's a difference between testing out a new feature and also testing out a new feature in a way that you're going to find out what are the type of customers that are most going to resonate with that, right? Because a lot of times you'll release a new feature thinking it's going to work for one audience, but if you're not testing it with multiple types of audiences, you might be missing something. Maybe there's another audience that will actually do better for it. I know there's actually a company I was working with a few months ago. They do like video software, like really, really cool like video editing software for Android. And they're going to release out this whole new chroma key feature, and they thought it was going to be a huge hit with people that were doing mobile journalism for whatever reason. They thought, oh, like people are going to be able to like on the road quickly set up a green screen and do it. And so like they spent a bunch of money marketing on this, thinking that was what the ideal target audience was going to be, and it failed. It didn't do very well. But then they just happened to accidentally include in their Facebook campaign, they included a campaign for more like YouTubers, right? And that audience did really, really well with it. And they're like, wow, why didn't we think about this in the first place? Of course, YouTubers would love to be able to do easy green screens. So one thing that's important is also like when you're doing your initial test, make sure that you get a bunch of different customers as well from different targeting. But in terms of actually setting up the experiment and once you've got an idea of something that you want to test, really, I always just go out and I just build a landing page. If it's something where you can easily copy and paste an existing page on your website and tweak a few things and throw it back up and publish it live, do that. If it's anything that's going to take you more than a day, really, to build out, just use Unbounce. Or there's some other similar landing page builders out there. It's probably the most popular one, though, and it's really easy to get stuff rolling with it. And usually what I'll do is I'll just take whatever feature or product or whatever I'm testing, just list out 3 or 5 of the core ideas of it. So if it's you're introducing a new package for your SaaS product and it's going to allow you to export CSVs and like exporting Excel documents and stuff is like the big feature. Then you're going to do a whole page. It's basically almost like if you had a feature page on your website all based around exporting, right? So you're just taking that one feature of your product that you're thinking of improving or a new feature that you're going to come out with and just building a landing page around that. And then from that, there's a few ways that you can actually measure the conversion as well. So personally, I like emails the best, just getting emails. And this is kind of similar to what Andre was talking about a little bit before with his like the Hulu page. But I find emails are like the best get because it's something where somebody has to put at least some effort into creating an email. Buttons work as well. So if it was just like a button that says like, yeah, sign up, and you just after that you're shooting them to a page that says it'll be available soon. That gives you some idea of, okay, like, we sent 100 people to the page, 5 people click through to sign up, but we don't have a sign up page yet. Versus like, if you're capturing an email, it's even more so of a strong signal. So not only are they interested enough to click the button, but they're interested enough to actually put their email in for whatever you've got there. But and then finally is this KISS. Who knows what KISS means? All right, perfect. All right, so this is an example that I really, really like for this. Shoot. So this is Buffer. Is everybody kind of familiar with Buffer at all? Okay, so Buffer, what they do is it's basically a really easy tool to schedule tweets and Facebook posts and stuff like that. So it's just like a social media management tool, but they kind of like made their strong point originally off of scheduling posts. So you could schedule a whole week of content, your whole marketing strategy, and it would just like tweet out, at the times that you set up ahead of time. And honestly, actually, if you guys are interested in like learning more about growth, they've got a great blog on just different growth tips, and it shows kind of like how they've done all this stuff as well. But this is one of the first things they did before they ever launched their service, wrote any code, did anything at all. The founder threw up this page. It basically was just keeping it really simple. Gave out their 3 value props. You hit the plans and pricing button, and it takes you to a page where they had an email capture on there, right? So this was really easy. Just allowed them to initially gauge, how many people are actually interested in signing up for this, and they could go out, run a Facebook ad campaign, whatever, get an idea from that as well before even our product launch. Okay, it costs us maybe this much to acquire a customer, right? We can get clicks. We can drive people that are interested in, Twitter and managing their Twitter accounts, and then they're putting their email at like a 3% rate, and it's costing us, 20 cents a click. So from that, we know that it's going to cost us $6 for a customer. That's awesome, right? And that's without a product even being built. And so this is like in Unbounce. You basically would just set it up, and it's going to come back, and you're going to see like the number of visitors, your conversion rate. And one thing that you should definitely do for this first version is just try out a few different iterations of that main headline text, right? So just like maybe change the way that those first 3 are worded. I just find when you're sending an initial test through, like you don't want to have too many variables, but I usually will just use the copy as one. So I'll just kind of write 2 versions of the copy. Yeah. Yeah. Exactly. So for all of these, it's always stuff that I'm buying traffic for, right? I buy traffic for it, right? So it's just be like through a Facebook ad or a Google campaign. This is something where I think like a lot of times people are like, well, like it's going to cost us money for that. It might be easier to just wait until we get the organic traffic. I think that just in the interest of time, just to move fast and experiments, it's perfectly fine to throw a few $100 at tests like this and know instantly if that feature is going to work. Yeah, so how much traffic to buy? And this depends a little bit too on the budget for that test and kind of how much you're willing to spend. Usually, just across the different tests I've run with this stuff, I usually find that I can get clicks anywhere from 25 cents to like $1.25, right? So that usually means that if you have a conversion rate that's anything above a couple percent, which you want to have for these type of pages, you usually can get by spending between $100 to $500, right? Which will get you a couple hundred visitors through the site. So I would say just as a benchmark, 200 to 300 is usually the number of visitors that it takes until I can say like, oh, that's statistically significant enough. However, if you're sending 300 people to the page and you get like 4 people that click the pricing button, it's going to be a lot lower. Generally what you're aiming for, if it's a page where you don't have an email capture, the best landing pages that are just like a button, a single CTA, are going to convert at about 35 to 40%. Anything above 15%, I would consider like good enough. If it's lower than that, even if you're getting cheap traffic, it's still probably a failure. You just haven't optimized it enough because, once again, this is a really simple landing page, right? It's like super clear what you're supposed to be getting from that. And then in terms of the email capture, I would say around like a 5% rate from just a cold click. But these are also people that you're not buying just random traffic. Usually you're going to target something like this, right? So if this is a Buffer and they're buying Facebook ads, they're probably going to be buying something for people that are their position is social media manager and their interests are Twitter, on Facebook. So you're kind of like pre-selecting a little bit from the audience. And that's actually an important note because when you run these tests, there's there's 2 things that can happen, right? It could be the landing page is crap, but it can also be the traffic that you send in there is crap. So just something to take into account. All right. And then in terms of actually driving this traffic, I usually use Facebook for a lot of this stuff, just because it's usually easier and cheaper to get okay traffic off the start with Facebook. Generally, I found that Facebook sometimes can be a little harder to scale up on niche audiences versus like Google AdWords. It's a little bit more set. Hey, this is what your cost per click is going to be, and it just is a matter of increasing your budget, and it usually stays the same for cost per click. Facebook, your cost tends to shoot up when you raise your budgeting for a small like niche campaign usually. Yeah, and then like for a really specific market, I'd use AdWords, especially for B2B stuff. Facebook is just more generally consumer products it does a little bit better for. If you could download like a list of emails, or if you have a good email list of people to go off of, you can upload that into Facebook and just target those people for B2B. But generally, B2B stuff, AdWords will be a little bit better. And then the next thing I do is once I've got the landing page built, is I'll go through and I'll make like a list of relevant interests. So if you go into Facebook's ads tool, there's a whole like interest section, and I just start typing in a bunch of words that are related to what I'm looking for, and I try and find audiences that don't have, I mean, it's a decent enough reach size, but it's not too big. So what that means, I think this next slide here, all right, this one, right? So when you're putting stuff in, it's going to have a reach. This is actually a campaign I was running in Korea. And for this one, it had 2.6 million people was the total potential reach, which is super, super broad, right? If you're targeting for a product that's only going to be to a certain niche or a feature that you've got that you're releasing that, you know, this is for people that manage their own small business and it's an export tool, you're probably going to not want that big of a reach. It means you're going way too vague. Generally, I'm looking for around 50,000 to like 200,000 for my reach size once I put in my settings there. And then with that, usually what I do is I'll take these ads and I'll run one interest targeting per each one, and I'll duplicate it. So in the Facebook ads tool, it makes it really easy. You can just Control D and duplicate each ad set. And so I'll do, like for this one, I had like 50 different ones, right? And I'm spending between $3 to $5 on each one of those a day, which generally, if you're getting a decent click rate, means you're going to get I mean, if you're getting a decent price, which would be around 50 cents, means each one of these is going to be driving between 20 to 30 clicks a day. And after a couple days, you'll have enough to look at each one of the interests and even see within the interests which interests are going to be better than others. I also will say that there's a little bit of this that you get kind of a feel for. So statistical significance on a Facebook ad, you usually need to get like 50 to 100 clicks before you can actually see what the price is going to level off at, and also what kind of your click-through rate is. To be honest, though, if you do it a bunch, you get to the point where you can kind of see ahead of time where stuff is trending. So now I'll run a Facebook ad with like 50 different interests, and I'll go in after like 3 hours, and I can already see stuff that it might only have like 2 or 3 clicks, but there's other ones that have like 15 clicks already. So I'll just disable the ones that have 2 to 3 clicks. Maybe if I let them run, they might have turned out to be good, but I'm just in the interest of saving time. I just like cut off the stuff that's not working right away and just stick on the stuff that's working. So from this, I'll probably, you know, have 50 interests and narrow it down to like 5 to 10 within the first day. And usually I can get by with only spending a couple $100 to do that. And then I'm also getting a ton of traffic into the site, and so I should actually already see conversions on the other side of it as well. Basically for this, like I was saying before, the landing page conversion should be more than 5%. If you targeted well, it should be above 25%. And then like, if your first test fails, like I was saying, it might be that your targeting was bad. It doesn't necessarily mean that the idea was wrong. So you gotta kind of go back to your customer hypothesis. So if we were looking before, like, oh, social media made interest that tweet a lot, maybe we should have been looking at a different crowd. Maybe it's actually people that are, you know, like I was saying for the example, they're YouTube celebrities or something like that. Maybe there's more of a way that I can target those people. Or maybe it's just people that are super busy, but they tweet a lot still. And just figuring out a way to target them. So the other side of this is, once you actually have it set up and you have, you can prove that people are at least interested in the idea, the next thing I like to test is actually test the consumer sensitivity to pricing, right? So going back to that buffer example, he showed that people were at least interested, and he showed up front, it wasn't like get it free, it said see plans and pricing, right? It was enough of an example to basically already, you know, if somebody only wanted a free tool, they probably wouldn't click see plans and pricing. So at least kind of vetted out the fact that people were willing to pay. So the next level of it, though, is actually going back. Come on. Yeah, so this is the next level of it, right? So actually testing what level are they going to be paying at, and kind of giving you a little bit more insight into the different prices that people might be willing to pay. So now it's really the same test, just added in another page in between, right? So now you're getting people that had enough intent. They're like, oh, this looks cool. Show me the plans. Then they get to the pricing page. They actually chose one of the prices, right? So basically saying, I'm pretty willing to pay for this, and then put in their email address. And at that point, I think that's a pretty good signal. If you're getting conversions through this and it's working well and you see success in this test, that you could actually go out and build it. Yeah, so this was he asked if they ran these simultaneously, if this is a second test. Yeah, so this is a second test. So the first one, they just first wanted to test, like, can we even get email addresses from this, right? Are people willing enough that they might be willing to, like, pay for a paid product that schedules your tweets, right? Let's see if they'll put in their email for that. And then once we actually have proven out that people are interested in a paid tool for sending out tweets, we're going to try and figure out what pricing level, right? So once again, they don't even have a product yet, and you can start figuring out, like, you know what, we could actually charge $7 for this, and people would pay it. Yeah, so you definitely could. You could, that's actually something I think I have another slide on that, but basically, like, taking those emails that you collected the first time through, and actually, he's asking, could you just use those again? So I usually like to actually just reach out to those people directly versus throwing them through another landing page, because this is kind of giving you like a cold read, right, of the audience, and that's half the goal there, is to see, like, hey, can we actually acquire customers at a reasonable cost on top of the fact of, you know, is this a product that people want? So once you have those emails, there's a lot more you can do with those. Yeah, so here we go, right? You were one step ahead of me. Yeah, so once you have your emails, everybody that puts in an email, even if you're not going to build out this product for sure, it's still kind of on the fence about it, email them all. You know, make sure that you're emailing them within 24 hours of them putting your email address in. The studies have shown, like, once you get past that 24-hour window, people even forget that they put the email in. Honestly, the best time window is like 5 to 10 minutes of putting in their email. So if you can't do an autoresponder, like, have someone monitoring it and sending it out, but honestly, it's easy enough to do autoresponders these days. Everybody should be able to do that. And then, yeah, I mean, if somebody's interested enough to go to, like, a random landing page and put in their email address, even after it says, like, it's coming soon, they're probably somebody that's pretty well targeted for this product, so there's a lot of stuff you can get out of those. So don't just take those emails and think of them as a way of, like, oh, this validated the product. No, like, those are your first customers, and actually kind of, like, you know, keep following up with them about that. So that feature might be something that they would be willing to pay even more than you were thinking. It's just reaching out to them is going to be important at that point. And then for that stuff, like, make sure you're sending out, like, plain text emails. It works way better for those type of reach outs for building customer relationships versus, like, a templated email. So that covers kind of all that stuff is what I do when it's something that's usually kind of starting from scratch, or it's a new idea, or it's like it's a big feature change. Maybe it's like a pivot on a model of something I'm working on. Now I'm going to kind of go over a little bit more in terms of how to do this for existing businesses and existing products, right? Because you're not always going to have the same setup where it's like you can just throw out, you know, you can just consolidate it down into one little piece and build a landing page on it. So there's a few different ways that you can approach it for existing businesses. So I don't know if you guys have seen this before. You actually can Google it. 42 Floors is like a basically helps people find office real estate in a bunch of the big cities in the United States. And they've got a pretty cool blog on some of their testing and stuff they've done. And this is actually one of the tests that they ran. So I'm just going to walk real quick through this. And if you guys have any questions, you know, just raise your hand. But basically, their problem was they tried a bunch of stuff, and they had this page right here where people can, like, basically just, like, find listings. And they had a lot of people that are coming in. You know, they type in an address or they choose a neighborhood and get to this page where it shows you all the listings. But after, like, kind of you know, going through their funnel from a high level, they were realizing, like, this is where we have the most drop off, right? Like, people put in an address, they start looking at office real estate, but then very few people are actually clicking in and then actually, like, requesting more information. Right, so they wanted to clean up and kind of make this listing page a bit better. So they did a bunch of UX trials, kind of, you know, got a lot of feedback from people directly, reached out to customers, and then they built a new version. Took them 3 months, and they had like a 1% boost in inquiries, right? So basically, if you're a startup and you're spending 3 months to build something for a 1% boost, that's pretty disheartening, right? So they got that, and they were just like, shit, like we don't know what we're doing here. We're just gonna put that on ice for a bit, right? Because like they were all like hyped up about this, and then like the results didn't come. So like, okay, maybe we just need to improve a different part of their funnel. But really, what happened was they just spent too much time making everything perfect without actually getting preliminary results from people. And one of the other problems is they focused on just talking to customers and getting that qualitative data before they built anything, rather than actually proving it out too. Because I'm sure most of you you've talked to people doing pre-sales, right? They're like, yeah, we're really interested. We totally pay for that. You come back to them in a month and you're like, all right, it's going to be $100 a month. And like, oh, well, yeah, like it looks cool, but like I don't know if I'm going to do that right now. So that's kind of what happened, right? You have qualitative data that came back looking good, but then you didn't verify it with quantitative before they actually went out and built it. So a while later, they came back to it again, and they're like, all right, you know what? Like, there's got to be something to do with that. Let's just do something crazy. So they had kind of a designer hackathon, more or less, and like I think the designers were in the office for the whole weekend, just like throwing together a whole bunch of random pages, right? They're like, let's just try like the most random stuff. Like this one looks like kind of like an older like business site. You know, this one's really nice and clean and simple. This one kind of like walks through more of a wizard. Just like a bunch of different ideas that were like pretty dramatically different for this particular page. And then what they did is they actually sent traffic at them. And they actually built each one of these out. I think what they did is they just used like one of those services where you just throw them a photo, like a PSD, and they just turn it into HTML. So like a lot of it didn't really work. It was just kind of like they just wanted to see if people would click on them more, right? So they got these pages built out for them, and they just kind of threw them all up and had their existing users go through it. But then they also just bought a bunch of traffic and just threw traffic at each one of these landing pages, right? Just bought a bunch of traffic for people that were searching for New York office spaces, maybe on Google AdWords, and threw a couple hundred people at each landing page. And then from that, they found a landing page that right away led to like a 32% increase, right? So they spent 1 week of work this time around, just made a bunch of different mock-ups, threw them up, threw a bunch of traffic at it, and the ideas were different enough that they were able to get a 32% increase in inquiries. As Jandini was just saying in the last talk, a lot of times, people get disheartened because you run one test and it doesn't necessarily work the first time around. Usually it's like 1 in 7 tests will actually give you something meaningful. But that 1 in 7, think about it. They had 7 other ones that fail. I don't think they're really crying and going, boo-hoo, those other 7 designs we had didn't work out. You know, they got 30% increase from one of them. That's more than enough. It's funny, like Apple actually does. So for a lot of their UX stuff and tests that they run, they'll do like 9 iterations, right? Before they even build it out, they'll do 9 iterations with their design team, and then they'll actually go out and do like usability studies on it and stuff. But like their average is they'll take 9 iterations until they get to something where like, okay, we've got enough data, we've got enough feedback from people now that it makes sense to build it out. There's never any harm to doing lots of different tests. Just the only hard part there is just making sure that you have the budget to be able to send enough traffic to all those different tests. So that's generally like a limiting factor more early on. For them, like this company was around for a while. Sending a few hundred visitors to 8 different pages wasn't as big of a cost for them. So that's one thing to keep in mind as well. But any questions on this stuff? Cool. Basically, the moral of this all is don't waste time, build more MVPs. It's a lot simpler to test things than you think sometimes. And even if this model might not necessarily work for exactly what you're doing, there's probably something simpler you can do out there and just send people at a landing page. Like, never underestimate the power of just building out a landing page for something and getting feedback off it versus actually building out a whole feature. So that's all I've got for this. Any questions? Yeah.
So for the 42 board version,
Yeah.
that's got to tie into their actual product as well. Right? If somebody clicked on it, the whole thing has to work end-to-end.
Yeah, so what they did is, I believe they just did it for like their top view for like New York or whatever, right? Or it's like a specific neighborhood in New York. I can't remember exact details of it. But it was enough where they just basically hard-coded in the first page of search results, right? And then they basically they were measuring the engagement on all the different pieces of it, right? So the real metric they wanted to get was getting more people to click into the actual product or click into the actual listing. But let's just say that, I don't know, like someone changed the map size or like choose another drop down. I think it was just tied into their other system and just kick you back to the normal page, right? But like the main thing they were measuring for was like, can we improve the number of people that get to the details page? But yeah.
They validate that traffic when they implement that, and they see that increase.
Yeah. Yeah, so that 32% increase that they had, I think it was actually a little bit higher than that on the actual version. So the question was asked was, did that actually work in production as well as it did in the test? And yeah, the answer is that it actually worked a little bit better. But that's a good question, because that's definitely something to keep in mind too, right? They might have just had like really, really good keywords for that people. But cool.
Outside of like web, you recommended me for iOS app development?
Yeah, so that makes things a little bit trickier, right? Like just the iteration cycle on that stuff is a lot tougher to run tests on sometimes. What I've actually seen work pretty well though is a lot of times where, people will just build out a mobile page site for it instead, and just like normally when they send people to their app, they just kind of have like a page that would mimic it a bit, but it's a lot tougher to do. I mean, it works for some things, but if you've got like a really ingrained feature into your app, like you're not going to be able to use this methodology as much, because the cost of installs just makes it prohibitive. So, awesome. All right, well, if you guys have any more questions, I'll be around, so just hit me up.